There are wounds that time does not seem to touch, echoes of betrayal that linger in the quiet corners of the soul. We look at those who have wronged us and wonder, how can we release what feels so unforgivable? How do we reconcile the weight of injustice with the call to love? Forgiveness is not a simple act. It is a journey into the unknown, a step into the mystery of grace itself. But perhaps what feels impossible is not meant to be done by our strength alone. Perhaps in the grand design of existence, even our deepest sorrows are threads in a tapestry too vast for us to see. Like a melody we do not yet understand, every hurt, every silence, every unanswered question is part of a divine symphony still unfolding. And so, the question is not whether we can forgive, but whether we are willing to trust that even the broken pieces of our story belong to something far greater than we can imagine. There is a strange thing we do with pain. We hold on to it, cradle it like a possession, as if keeping it close will somehow restore what was lost. We tell ourselves that remembering the hurt, reliving the betrayal will give us control over it, that in our refusal to forgive, we are preserving some sense of justice. But ask yourself, who is truly suffering? The one who wronged you, or the one still carrying the weight of what they did? Unforgiveness is a quiet thief. It does not announce itself with fanfare. It does not arrive as a sudden storm. No, it seeps into the small moments of our days, into the way we speak, the way we trust, the way we hold ourselves in the world. It lingers in the tension of our shoulders, in the heaviness of our thoughts. It turns us into prisoners of the past, shackled not by what happened, but by our unwillingness to release it. We think holding on protects us, that if we keep our pain alive, it will serve as a shield, ensuring we are never hurt that way again. But in reality, it is not armor, it is a cage. And it is we who have locked ourselves inside. Look at the natural world. The river does not hold onto the branches that fall into its current. It carries them away. The tree does not cling to its withered leaves. It lets them drift to the earth, making room for new life. Everything in existence flows, moves, transforms. Only we resist. Only we try to make time stand still in the places where we were wounded. But what does it serve us? Does replaying the betrayal soften its sting? Does rehearsing the injustice balance the scales? No. It only deepens the wound. It is like drinking poison and expecting another to fall ill, and yet we do it because pain, even when unbearable, feels familiar. There is a strange comfort in suffering we have known for so long. But there comes a moment when we must ask ourselves, is this weight mine to carry? If we are honest, much of what we hold on to is not just the offense itself, but the story we have built around it, the justifications, the reasons why we are entitled to our anger, the belief that forgiveness means weakness, that to release this pain is to let someone escape without consequence. But forgiveness was never about letting another go. It is about letting ourselves go. It is not an absolution of wrongdoing, nor is it a dismissal of what was lost. It is simply the quiet acknowledgement that the past is already gone, and no amount of resentment will change that truth. Perhaps you have been carrying this burden for years. Perhaps you have built your life around it, shaped your identity through it, convinced yourself that without it you would not be who you are. But is that true? Or is it simply the voice of suffering whispering that you must keep holding on? Look again at the river, at the tree, at the endless unfolding of life itself. None of it clings. None of it resists the movement of time. And yet here you are, gripping so tightly to what is already behind you. But what if, just for a moment, you loosened your grip? What if the strength you have been searching for is not in holding on, but in letting go? Because in the end, it is not the pain itself that imprisons us. It is our refusal to release it. There are moments in life when pain arrives uninvited, when suffering crashes into our existence like a wave we never saw coming. It is in these moments we ask, why? Why did this happen? Why was this allowed? We search for meaning in the chaos, for some thread of logic that can justify the wound, but often all we find is silence. And that silence, that aching emptiness, is what makes suffering feel unbearable. But perhaps we have been looking at pain all wrong. Perhaps suffering is not an interruption of life's design, but an essential part of it. Consider a symphony. If every note were the same, if there were no pauses, no shifts in tone, no moments of tension, it would cease to be music at all. It would become noise, constant, predictable, lifeless. It is the moments of dissonance, the minor chords, the unresolved notes that make the music rich, that make the resolution when it finally comes so profoundly beautiful. What if life, too, is a kind of music? What if suffering is not a mistake, not an error in the arrangement, but an integral part of the composition itself? It is a difficult thing to accept because suffering feels unjust. It feels unnatural. And yet, is there anything more natural? The seed must break open for the tree to grow. The caterpillar must dissolve completely to become a butterfly. The night must come before the dawn. In every corner of existence, pain is not an anomaly. It is a force of transformation. It strips away what is temporary, what is false, what cannot remain. And in doing so, it reveals something deeper, something truer. Think back to the moments in your life that shaped you the most. Were they the easy ones? Were they the times when everything went as planned, when nothing tested you, when you faced no hardship? Or were they the moments when you were brought to your knees, when you were forced to confront the parts of yourself you had never seen before? Pain, if we allow it, is a kind of mirror. It shows us who we are, and if we are willing to look closely, it also reveals who we might become. And so we arrive at a difficult truth. Suffering, as much as we resist it, carries within it the seeds of something greater. This does not mean that the wounds inflicted upon us were just. It does not mean that the betrayals we endured were right. It does not mean we deserved what happened, but it does mean that no suffering is without purpose. That even what was meant for harm can be woven into something greater than we can yet understand. But here's the thing, transformation is not automatic. Pain itself does not make us wise. Time itself does not heal. It is what we do with suffering that determines what it becomes. We can let it harden us, turn us bitter, fill us with resentment, or we can let it break us open, make us softer, deepen our compassion, and widen our capacity for grace. Because after all, what is grace, if not the ability to look at our suffering and say, even this can be redeemed? There will always be things we do not understand. There will always be wounds that feel too deep, injustices that seem too great, but perhaps understanding is not what we need. Perhaps what we need is trust. Trust that even in the silence, even in the unanswered questions, even in the suffering we cannot yet make sense of, something greater is at work. And if we can trust that, then even pain loses its power to break us. Because we know deep down that what feels like an ending is only part of a story still unfolding. Forgiveness is a strange thing. We talk about it as if it is a transaction, as if it is something we give in exchange for closure, for peace, for justice. But the truth is, forgiveness does not operate by the logic of the world. It does not follow the rules of fairness. It is not about weighing the scales, about making things right in the way we imagine they should be. It is something far more mysterious, far more unsettling, because real forgiveness is not an act of reason. It is an act of surrender. And surrender, well, that is terrifying. We think of surrender as weakness, as letting go of our power, as allowing someone who has wronged us to escape accountability. But what if we have misunderstood what power really is? What if the strongest thing we could ever do is release our grip on the very thing that is keeping us trapped? Because when we refuse to forgive, what we are really doing is refusing to let go of a story we have told ourselves. The story of what should have happened, the story of how things were supposed to be, the story of how the past was meant to unfold differently. But the past is already written. It is done, fixed, unchangeable. And yet, we resist it. We resist reality itself, clinging to our suffering as if by holding on to it tightly enough we might somehow rewrite what has already been. But life does not work that way. Life moves forward. It flows like a river, always changing, always shifting, never stopping for long. And yet, here we are, standing in its currents, gripping onto the debris of what has already passed. We say we want peace, we say we want freedom, and yet we refuse to let go of the very thing that keeps us bound. Perhaps we believe that to forgive means to erase what happened, to minimize the pain, to let someone off the hook. But forgiveness is not an erasure, it is an acknowledgement. It is looking directly at what happened, seeing it clearly, feeling its weight, and still choosing to release it. Not because the other person deserves it, not because what they did was right, but because we deserve freedom. And this is where surrender comes in, because forgiveness is not something we force. It is not something we manufacture through willpower or effort. It is something we allow, something we step into, something that happens when we stop resisting the flow of life and let it carry us forward. So what if you did that? What if you stopped fighting what has already happened? What if instead of gripping onto the pain, you simply let it pass through you? Not to forget it, not to excuse it, but to free yourself from it. It is not easy, of course. The mind will resist, the heart will hold back. It will whisper that you need your anger, that without it you will be vulnerable, exposed, unprotected. But the truth is, you are already exposed. You are already carrying the wound. The only question is whether you will let it define you or whether you will surrender it to something greater than yourself. Because in the end, forgiveness is not about them. It is not about whether they deserve it, whether they have apologized, whether they have changed. It is about you. It is about your freedom, your peace, your willingness to stop carrying a burden that was never meant to be yours forever. And so the choice is yours. Hold on or let go. Stay bound or be free. The river is already moving. The only question is whether you will move with it. We are often told that healing is a process, that time will soften the sharp edges of our wounds, that if we wait long enough, the pain will dissolve into the past. But time by itself does nothing. It does not reach into the places we are broken and mend them. It does not carry away the weight of resentment or smooth out the jagged memories we wish we could forget. No, healing is not a passive thing. It is a journey we must take willingly. And like all journeys, it asks something of us. What it asks more than anything is that we meet ourselves honestly, that we step into the places we have avoided, into the emotions we have suppressed, into the grief we have tucked away in the corners of our hearts. Because real healing does not happen at a distance. It does not come from looking away. It requires presence. It requires courage. It requires us to sit with our pain, not to be consumed by it, but to finally listen to what it has been trying to tell us. Pain is not the enemy we think it is. It is a messenger. It comes bearing truths we have refused to face, lessons we have resisted learning. When someone has wronged us, it is easy to focus only on what they did, to replay the scene over and over, searching for some explanation that will make sense of it. But healing asks us to turn inward, to ask a different question. What is this pain revealing in me? Perhaps it is revealing wounds that were already there long before this hurt arrived. Perhaps it is uncovering fears, insecurities, places where love had not yet fully reached. Perhaps beneath the anger, beneath the resentment, there is sorrow. Sorrow for what was lost, for what was never given, for the love that was not received in the way it should have been. And if we can sit with that sorrow, if we can allow ourselves to feel it without judgment, without resistance, something remarkable happens. It begins to soften. Healing is not about erasing the past. It is not about pretending the wound was never there. It is about integrating the pain into the fullness of who we are so that it no longer defines us, no longer controls us. It is about taking back the power we unknowingly gave to the person who hurt us, reclaiming it as our own. But how do we do this? How do we step into healing when the pain feels too heavy, too vast, too deeply embedded in who we have become? We start where we are. We begin with small acts of self-compassion. We remind ourselves that we are not broken, that we are not weak for feeling what we feel. We allow ourselves to grieve. Not just for the pain, but for the parts of ourselves that were shaped by it. And then, when we are ready, we begin to let love in again. Not necessarily from others, but from ourselves. We stop waiting for someone else to make it right, to apologize, to change. We stop believing that our healing depends on anything outside of us. Because the truth is, no one else holds the key to our freedom. We do. We always have. So the question is not whether healing is possible. It is whether we are willing to step toward it. Whether we are willing to release the version of ourselves that was built around the pain and step into the one that exists beyond it. Because that self is already there, waiting. It has always been there. And the moment we stop clinging to the past, the moment we stop identifying with the wound, we step into something vast, something open, something free. And that is where healing truly begins. We often think of forgiveness as a solitary act, something that happens in the quiet of our own hearts, something between us and the past. But forgiveness does not exist in isolation. It ripples outward, shaping not only our own lives, but the lives of those around us. It is not just about setting ourselves free from resentment. It is about shifting the entire way we move through the world, the way we relate to others, the way we choose to love despite everything. Because whether we realize it or not, the wounds we carry do not stay contained within us. They seep into our words, our actions, our silences. They shape the way we trust, the way we hold back, the way we protect ourselves from ever being hurt again. Pain has a way of making us smaller, of convincing us that distance is safer than connection. And so, without even meaning to, we build walls where bridges should be. But here's the thing about walls. They do not just keep others out, they keep us in. They isolate us within the very pain we are trying to escape. And if we are not careful, if we hold on to our wounds as if they define us, we risk passing that pain forward, handing it down to others like an inheritance no one asked for. Forgiveness, then, is not just an act of release. It is an act of creation. It is a choice to stop the cycle, to refuse to let the pain we endured become the pain we inflict. Because suffering has a way of echoing through generations. A heart hardened by betrayal learns to withhold love. A person made bitter by injustice learns to see the world through suspicious eyes. And so the pain continues. Not because it must, but because no one has yet chosen to end it. But when we forgive, truly forgive, we do something radical. We break the chain. We say, this ends with me. Not because what happened was right, not because it did not matter, but because we refuse to be ruled by it. We refuse to let it dictate the way we love, the way we trust, the way we show up in this world. And perhaps that is the greatest act of power we have, to transform what was meant to wound us into something that heals, to take the very thing that was meant to harden us and let it soften us instead. To look at the past and say, I will not become what hurt me. Because there is something extraordinary that happens when we stop carrying the weight of bitterness. We make room for something else. We make room for grace, for joy, for connection. We make room to see others not just as extensions of our pain, but as people who are also carrying wounds of their own. We begin to understand that everyone is fighting battles we cannot see. That hurt people often hurt others not because they are cruel, but because they too have never learned how to let go. And so when we choose forgiveness, we are not just freeing ourselves. We are freeing others from the burden of our unresolved pain. We are stepping into a version of ourselves that is no longer defined by what was done to us, but by what we have chosen to become. It is not easy, of course. Nothing about forgiveness is easy. But then again, neither is carrying the weight of a closed heart. Neither is living a life dictated by the past. Neither is looking back years from now and realizing that we never truly lived because we were too busy holding on to a wound that should have been released long ago. And so the choice is simple: to stay bound to what was, or to step into the freedom of what could be. To continue the cycle, or to break it. To hold on, or finally, once and for all, to let go. There comes a moment in every journey when we must decide whether we will continue carrying the past or step fully into the present. Forgiveness is not a single act, not a one-time decision that wipes the slate clean. It is a practice, a way of being, a path we walk every day. And as we walk it, we begin to see that it was never really about the other person. It was never about excusing them or pretending the past did not happen. It was always about us. About the way we choose to live, about the weight we are willing to carry, about whether we will allow ourselves to be free. And freedom, true freedom, is a strange and unsettling thing, because we have grown so accustomed to our pain, so familiar with our resentment, that we have mistaken them for a part of who we are. We say we want to be free, and yet we hesitate. We hesitate because we wonder, if I let go of this anger, if I stop replaying the past, then who am I without it? What remains when I release the thing I have carried for so long? But that is the very heart of it, isn't it? That moment of standing on the edge, looking out over the unknown, realizing that we have built our identity around something that was never meant to stay. And in that moment, we are faced with a choice. Do we hold on to what is familiar, even if it is painful? Or do we take a step into the open, into the vastness of what could be? Because there is a world beyond resentment, a world beyond the tightness in your chest, beyond the endless replaying of what was said, beyond the need to prove that you were right, that they were wrong, that justice was never served. There is a world where you wake up and feel light, where the past no longer sits on your shoulders, where you no longer measure your life by the wounds you have endured, and it is waiting for you. It has always been waiting, not as some distant possibility, not as something that only happens to the enlightened or the lucky, but as something that is already here, already available to you if only you would choose it. But that is the key. You must choose it. No one else can choose it for you. No apology, no act of atonement, no grand gesture will ever bring you to that place if you are unwilling to go there yourself. The door is open, but only you can walk through it. And that is the beauty of it. Because it means that your freedom is not in anyone else's hands. It is not something they can give you or take away. It is not dependent on whether they have changed, whether they have understood the weight of what they did, whether they have made amends. It is yours, entirely yours. And so you stand at the threshold. You can keep waiting. You can keep carrying. You can keep hoping that something outside of you will come along and finally make it right. Or you can decide in this moment that you are done waiting, that you are done carrying, that you are done postponing the life that is meant to be yours. Because in the end, forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about remembering differently. It is about seeing that the past, no matter how painful, no longer has to define you. It is about realizing that freedom has never been something you had to earn. It has only ever been something you had to allow. And so the only question that remains is this. Will you allow it? Will you allow yourself to step into the life that has been waiting for you all along? Will you allow yourself to finally, truly let go